are you doing? My name is Ryan Kelly, and I'm going to be hosting another episode of Know Your Bosses. Know Your Bosses, if you're not aware, is a show where I will review some of the most classic bosses to the lesser known ones. I'll rank them based on their difficulty, creativity, appearance, and fighting style. In the end, the boss will get a ranking from 1, avoid the fight, to 10, pursue the fight. So now that I've quickly gone over the rules, we can talk about the boss we'll be fighting today. Today I'm going to be discussing location. Since finding Ridley is pretty complex and I don't want to go over every twist and turn you'll need to make to find him, I'll start off with showing off his location on the Norfair map, and then cover what power-ups you'll need and some of the significant parts of the route to Ridley. Here's the entire map of Norfair and where you can find Ridley. In order to be able to get to Ridley, you'll need to have collected the gravity suit, the space jump, the screw attack, and of course you'll need to be able to store a good amount of missiles, super missiles, and power bombs. Also, before we discuss the significant parts of the route, let me show you where the entrance to Norfair is, just in case you're not sure. It's right here. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the significant places you'll encounter while heading towards Ridley. The first significant part of the route is the fight with the Golden Chorizo. You'll need to fight it in order to obtain the screw attack and be able to progress. You can find it here on the map. This is also how you'll know you're going the right way. Another thing you should keep in mind is that there are a lot of blocks that can only be destroyed with power bombs. In order to figure out which blocks can be destroyed with power bombs, you can use your X-ray visor or you can blow it up with a regular bomb, which will reveal what weapon is needed to destroy the block. And the final important part of the route is the area with the Ridley's guards. Now, since this boss is a little confusing, I'll briefly talk about how you can beat them. In order to be able to beat them, you'll need to wait until one of them goes into a jump kick, which will cause it to turn yellow and make it vulnerable. Once you've beaten both of them, keep going to the left and you will eventually find Ridley's lair, where the fight with Ridley will begin. Boss information. Since Ridley has so much information about him because he's the main antagonist in the Metroid series, I'll primarily be going over his role in Super Metroid specifically, as well as some interesting facts about this particular form of Ridley, since he has so many different versions of himself. For starters, Super Metroid takes place after the events of Metroid 2, Samus Returns. Super Metroid starts with Ridley stealing the last Metroid that Samus gave to some scientists. Ridley makes 2 appearances in Super Metroid, being when he steals the Metroid from the lab, and when you find him in his lair. Now what makes this Ridley interesting is that he's the 4th version of himself. Just a heads up, I will be spoiling certain bits of the story involving Ridley in Metroid, Metroid Prime 3, and Metroid 2 Samus Returns. I'll be putting a spoiler warning on the screen throughout the duration that I'm spoiling these games. Once it's off the screen, then I'm no longer spoiling anything. Anyway, in the original Metroid, Ridley was killed by Samus and was revived by the Space Pirate Brigade, Orpheon, to become Meta Ridley, a cybernetic version of Ridley in Metroid Prime. However, he was once again killed by Samus towards the end of Metroid Prime. Despite this, he was resurrected once again into a new and much stronger and more metallic version of himself, Omega Ridley. And once again, he was killed by Samus towards the end of Metroid Prime 3 and resurrected into a new cybernetic form of himself that is similar, but not exactly like Meta and Omega Ridley, being Proteus Ridley. Once again, Proteus Ridley gets bested by Samus at the end of Samus Returns. And shortly after the events of Samus Returns, Ridley returns in Super Metroid but is no longer robotic in any way, and is more like his original form in the original Metroid. Alright, I think that should cover Ridley's history in Super Metroid. Now let's talk about some general but still interesting facts about him. For starters, Ridley is the leader of the Space Pirates and was responsible for the murder of Samus' parents. Now you probably heard this 1,000 times, but that's not going to stop me from going over it. Ridley's name comes from the director of the Alien series, which Metroid is heavily influenced by, Ridley Scott. He also has been in almost every single main series Metroid game excluding Metroid Prime 2. He also has a pretty big role in the Super Smash Bros. Series. He made some cameos in Super Smash Bros. 64 and Super Smash Bros. Melee, being in the background of the ZB stage and in the intro segment respectively. He gets a bit of an upgrade in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and Super Smash Bros. For Wii U by becoming a fightable boss. In Brawl, he's like his traditional form, whereas in Super Smash Bros. 4, he is more like his other M form. And finally, after many people wanting Ridley as a playable character in Smash, especially yours truly, he's finally become one in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, I was just a little bit excited by this news.
You can't be serious.
Fucking...
What the fuck? It's Ridley!
Oh my god! I've waited this for so long! Oh my god, it's fucking Ridley! And finally, the most interesting thing I found about Ridley is that he appears to be based off of a real dinosaur, being the pterosaur. A dinosaur that existed throughout a majority of the Mesozoic era. Strategy. Before fighting Ridley, you should make sure that you have as much ammo and health as you can get. There's a save room here and an energy recharge room here. Also, you can grind in this room here for additional ammo if you're low on anything. With that in mind, let's talk about how to properly handle the fight with Ridley. For starters, Ridley has 18,000 health points and has several different attacks up his sleeve. He is able to use ranged fire blast projectiles, tail lashes where he bounces on his tail, which will do a good amount of damage if it lands, and a claw grabbing attack that grabs Samus and drops her from the top of the arena. Also, something you should keep in mind is if you're wearing the gravity suit, Ridley's body will deal 40 points of damage, his tail will deal 30 points of damage, and his fireballs will deal 15 points of damage. For the most part, Ridley's attacks are pretty easy to avoid. The only thing that's a pain in the ass about this fight is the size of the room. You only have a little platform to stand on, so most of the fight takes place in the air. So you'll have to make sure to properly time using either your charge beam, missiles, or super missiles. I'd recommend using your super missiles just because those do the most damage to him and is one of the quickest options to hitting him, the other being the regular missiles. Also, keep in mind that Ridley can't be damaged by hitting his tail, so you should definitely try to attack his head whenever you can since that's the most vulnerable spot. The more you damage Ridley, the more his skin pigment will change from a dark purple to a much lighter and brighter purple. Whenever Ridley changes color, he'll also move fast and will start doing the swooping maneuver. So if you do everything I said, then Ridley will die and you can finally face off against Mother Brain. Rewards. Once you beat Ridley, you'll be rewarded with nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. In the room next to Ridley's lair, there's a hidden energy tank right here that you can collect if you're trying to 100% the game, or you just need more health. Final thoughts. In this section of the video, I'll be talking about how the gameplay, design, difficulty, fun factor, and creativity weigh in on my opinion of whether I think a boss is good or not. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's start this section. For starters, let me just say that I've always been a huge fan of Ridley. Even before I started playing Metroid, I've always been in love with Ridley's design. I think he's by far my favorite Nintendo villain in both his design and backstory. However, I'm not a huge fan of his fight in Super Metroid. I feel like his moveset is lackluster and is a little too easy for how much of a role he plays in Super Metroid. Now you can argue that the SNES's hardware limited Metroid from being a better boss. Well, I'll argue that point with the boss's Kraid and Mother Brain, Without spoiling their fights, both of them are super creative and have very unique gameplay and elements of storytelling. The unique gameplay more so applies to Kraid, and the story elements apply more so with Mother Brain. So I don't understand why they couldn't have made some more creative elements with Ridley's fight, other than the fact that he can pick up Samus, which isn't even that creative because other enemies are already able to do this. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Ridley's lair is kinda small and oddly shaped, resulting in the fight feeling more cramped and spammy rather than intense. I feel like this encounter should have been more impactful like the fight with Mother Brain, instead of just feeling like another crony. So with all this in mind, my final score for Ridley is a 4 out of 10. So, what do you think about this boss? Do you think this boss deserves a higher or lower ranking? Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this video or not. Also, make sure to click the like button if you liked the video and hit that subscribe button. I finally have done it. The second season of Know Your Bosses is over. I wasn't expecting it to take nearly as long as it did to finish this season, especially considering that I started it in January of 2017. But now that it's over, it's time to make some changes with the third season of Know Your Bosses, which is already in the works. So I hope that you're excited for season 3, which should hopefully be coming out sometime in 2019. Anyway, thank y'all so much for supporting this show by watching it, suggesting episodes for me to do, and for giving me inspiration to keep the show going. Well, with that said, my name is Ryan Kelly, and I'll see you in the next season of Know Your Bosses.